Thank you, worship band. I continue to be grateful for how you guys are involved in planning and participating in worship here. I was just in communication yesterday with chapel coordinator at the Hershey campus at Lancaster Mennonite School, and she was asking how to, what I think is one of the most important things in creating an environment of worship in chapel. And I said, well, I think one of the things at least I see here is student involvement. That you guys are really interested in being involved and testing your skills, testing your call, and leading in worship. So I'm really grateful for the way you guys are testing your calling up front here and leading us in worship. Well, I had a dream. Can we turn on some more lights here? Thank you. I had a dream last night that I showed up here in chapel and no one was here. Thank goodness my dreams are not prophetic, but just a projection of my fears. But actually my fears do have some basis. We have some changes here this week because of speakers being ill. Tomorrow, unfortunately, our singer cannot be here because of emergency surgery. So we have Ron Sider coming to speak to us. I don't know how many of you know Ron. He lives here in Dock Woods. He is perhaps best known for his book, Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger. A well-known author, speaker, has been involved in many years in social justice and in politics. And he's going to talk tomorrow a little bit about his engagement and involvement in politics. So we look forward to that. And today, we were going to have some representatives from Franconia Mennonite Conference, which has its offices here on campus, to come and be a part of this time of prayer and blessing for Dr. Stoltzfus. But unfortunately, both the person who was going to come and the backup person both got sick. So you're stuck with me. So we'll make the best of it, right? And trust that God is here in our midst. Now there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are varieties of services, but the same Lord. There are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. I love this. And it's kind of what we're doing here this week. We're hearing from different people how the Spirit is manifest in them, in their gifts, in their service, in their work, and how they are using all of these gifts and talents for the common good in many different ways. And how are we being salt and light in this world? So we're going to hear a little bit of the story this morning from Dr. Stoltzfus about his own journey of faith, his call to ministry. And several months ago, he was licensed toward ordination. I'll explain that a little bit. At Plains Mennonite Church for his role as an educator, as superintendent, is your title now, I guess, for this campus and for Penview campus as well. Just a little bit about how we do calling of ministers in the Mennonite Church. So in the Mennonite Church, we have this thing called the priesthood of all believers, which we kind of adhere to. And it can mean many things, but one of the things it means in relation to leadership is that we have this fundamental belief that all of us are priests. We are all the priesthood of God. All of us are to be agents of God's grace in this world. It isn't just priests or pastors who are these agents of God's grace. It's all of us. But in the Mennonite Church, we also do have this system of call, like in most churches, of calling out certain persons for specific ministry and leadership roles in the church. And in our varying congregations, denominations, we have different titles for these, whether they're credentialed or not. We have deacons, elders, overseers, bishops, evangelists, shepherds, pastors, priests. We have many different titles for what we call these. And some of these are credentialed and some are not. Credentialed is simply an approval, kind of a stamp of approval by a church body for ministry to a particular person. And for credentialing for the, so Dr. Stoltzfus has been licensed toward ordination. So what that means is that it's simply much the same as ordination. It's kind of a testing period. So it's essentially a 2-year testing period where he tests both the inner and outer call of being a minister in his particular context. And so then after 2 years, there's this kind of reflection that he does, reflection that the community does, to help discern whether or not he's being called to be ordained for life. So ordination in the Mennonite Church is basically for life. I am ordained as well. I was ordained a number of years ago. And this calling to ordination happens in many different ways. And in the Mennonite Church, we're starting to recognize ministers in many different contexts beyond just those who are pastors. And this ordination is held by the conference, by Frank Cody Mennonite Conference, the officers here. And so one of their main tasks is kind of hold the credentials of pastors in our churches. And so this ordination is essentially a 3-way covenant between God, between us, as a community, as a church, and between Conrad. And we kind of work together in terms of testing that call. There's a story of a young farmer standing in his field, and he observed a peculiar cloud formation. And the clouds formed the letters G, P, and C. And he thought a little bit, and he thought that maybe it stood for go, G, preach, P, Christ, C. So he rushed to the deacons of his church, and he insisted that he's being called to preach because of this sign. And respectful of his passion, the deacons invite him to fill the pulpit and to preach. But that Sunday, the farmer's sermon is rather long and tedious and virtually incoherent. And when it finally reaches the end, the leaders sit in stunned silence. And finally, a wise deacon mutters to the would-be preacher, "Seems to me the clouds were saying, go plant corn." Now, it may be that after some years, Conrad, you will sense maybe a calling to be a farmer, I don't know, rather than an educator, but I don't sense that. Essentially, I share that story because I think in the Mennonite Church, we have this sense that it's really a calling from the community. And so, you have a role here this morning and for the next 10 years to kind of help Dr. Stoltzfus test this call to ministry. And, in the Mennonite Church, for a long time, we've had this concept of humility. It was rather, if you felt a call to be a pastor, you simply didn't go to someone and said, "I feel a call to be a pastor." You waited until other people kind of tapped you on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I think you have the gift to be a pastor or a leader in the church." In many ways, this was exercised through the process which we call pastors through the lot. It was done through kind of a selection of a straw or a slip of paper in a Bible that was kind of picked out among several persons, candidates who thought they were being called to ministry. Anyway, so this morning I'll stop here and let Dr. Stoltzfus share a little bit of his story. He's called to ministry, and then after he shares, and we'll have